Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Morrow Public Speaking and Presentations, Vienna Live with Simeon Morrow, and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone and/or go to the LinkedIn live video feed, the link to which I'll now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. This show thrives on participant contributions, and all participants are encouraged to actively participate in this webinar by asking questions and making comments. To do so, please either write in the chat room, raise your hand, or turn on your microphone and say hi, and I'll be delighted to include your perspective in the conversation. Tonight, our featured guests are the faculty and students from the Institute of Sociology at the University of St. Gallen. Leading our conversation is University Professor Patrik Aspers, Chair of Sociology, and Dr. Matias Dewey, Senior Researcher. Patrik, welcome.
Thank you, Simon. It's great being here.
Patrik, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what sociology means to you?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to say a few words on that. I mean, I'm a sociologist, as you said. I was brought up in Sweden and lived since 3 years in St. Gallen here in Switzerland. I also worked in Germany, in the US, and elsewhere. So I broad experience. I've done research on markets, sociology markets, and sociological theory. And I'm currently about to publish a book on uncertainty reduction, published by Oxford University Press next year. And sociology to me originally was an idea as a tool to understand the world, not me, but gradually it became also a tool to understand myself as a reflexive instrument to understand your own position in society, in relation to others. And I think today it's a bit both of, but it's primarily a means to understand us, how we hang together, the problems that are of a social nature, and less of the material side of it. So that's, I think I stop there. Maybe there are others, and I'm especially happy to see that students are here. So I hope you are active and ask questions and jump in and also present what you actually have done during the course.
Okay, Matias, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell us about yourself and what sociology means to you?
What sociology means to me. I'm a sociologist, and I studied sociology first in Argentina, then in Germany. I did my PhD, and also in other countries like the UK and the US. Also in different sociology departments. My field of research is economic sociology, especially illegal markets and marketplaces. And similar to Patrik, for me, sociology is a tool to make sense of society. To make sense of how different type of groups and type of different dynamics develop. And it has been always for me important to combine both fieldwork and theory, and I think both are crucial elements in our job. I think it's making sense and posing questions. I think it's the two main tasks and important features of my profession.
Okay, so are there any students who would like to introduce themselves and tell us what sociology means to them? We would be very, very glad to have you say hi if you are there. Please don't be shy. That's what we're here to do. So in the meantime, how about before, as the students are considering saying hi, let's go on to our first roundtable, which is contemporary marketplaces. What does a marketplace mean to you? So Patrik, why don't you start our discussion? When I first contacted you about doing this, I told you, oh yeah, let's talk about marketplaces, where you buy fruits and vegetables, or, where some Southern Italian guy is yelling at you and saying, he's selling salmon. So, and you said, well, okay, that's one kind of marketplace, but there are others.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think, when we were small, maybe our parents take us to a marketplace and we see all the things going on in the marketplace. Currently here in St. Gallen, for example, the place that is a physical place, which is called a marketplace. Of course, that's usually where some people trade also. It's the kind of Christmas market, which occupies this space currently, but it's still a market. There are a lot of people trying to sell things. But I think many of us who are older today and who grow up and become old realize that a lot of the trading we do is taking place online. So we actually buy things online and we use tools to find out about prices, about quality, and so on and so forth. And I think this is really where the contemporary discussion is centered around marketplaces which are online or virtual marketplaces, increasingly also global marketplaces. As you may know, you can buy things from basically all over the world, and so the market is much larger, and you have a specific sets of marketplaces where you enter, where you log on, or where you actually use a credit card or debit card to buy things to get the goods back home. And of course, there's a lot of competition in these different online marketplaces, and you can have hundreds, if not thousands of brands / companies / sellers competing at the same time online. And I think that's one of the characteristics of this, which of course leads to a lot of other dimensions too, for example, power relations and so on and forth. But maybe I'll stop there and we can.
Sure. Matias, tell us, I believe you and Patrik have been doing a course on marketplaces. What are your thoughts, and where do you begin normally when you speak to someone like me who doesn't have a really in-depth knowledge of what marketplaces are?
Well, first, I think our main challenge is to disentangle, these two concepts, markets and marketplaces, because in the usually both are the public, the general understanding of both are, they are used interchangeably. When I say marketplaces, people think I'm talking about markets, and in some other cases, when people talk about markets, they think I'm talking about marketplaces. So in a way, it's our first challenge is to show that that both for analytical purposes it is useful to make this distinction, and to stress that marketplaces, as the word says, refers to a place, and this means a lot when we talk about how these marketplaces are governed, how these marketplaces are related to a city, how these marketplaces are related to a certain infrastructure, how these marketplaces are related to power dynamics. And also, this is also true for markets. These markets are not necessarily related to a specific place, and this means also for all these dimensions that I mentioned before, this means different type of relationships. And what we try to do with our students is to show these dimensions, to show that there is, in case of marketplaces, someone who is organizing them, and to observe our reality through these lenses and identify different configurations of marketplaces, the traditional ones, but also the new ones, and different type of combinations that emerge through the dynamics of offline exchanges and online exchanges. We have different type of examples, and they work on these specific cases.
Okay, so we have Jenna Jacques Means. Excuse me if I pronounce your last name wrong. Hi.
Hello.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what sociology means to you?
Yes, so I'm with Sasha together with him in the course of Matias and Patrik Aspers. So we have studied Facebook Marketplace specifically, and social interactions that took place on this platform and what it meant for the trust patterns for people on this platform.
And tell us, were you surprised? What did you find out?
Well, we found that some scams specifically use some trust patterns to better deceive people, and some of these tools were taken from face-to-face interactions, and these had different meanings online than in reality.
Sasha, what was your take on it?
I would say another takeaway that we have is that the relation are much shorter online, and that there are no greetings or saying goodbye and some usual courtesies, and it's much more straight to the point, and the conversation are much shorter online than in the reality.
Okay, Patrik Aspers, perhaps we'll go back to you. What are your thoughts about what Sasha and Jenna are saying?
I think it's highly interesting. Of course, there's always this issue: to what extent is a marketplace, what is the market, and that. But I think when it comes to empirical question, that's always where we start. We don't start with the question, is this X or Y? We start with the problem, and then we try to address it. And I think this, for example, this issue of trust. This is something we see in the literature. We see it in reality when we do research. And of course, this is known since thousands of years, how to establish trust in relations. And this, of course, not just trading relations. Any type of relation is a trust base. I mean, that you can say something to the other person without the other person necessarily harming you, either by giving the information to other people or just turn it against you and use it against you. So this is a kind of, often we think of it as something that exists, and to some extent it does, but it's also a problem, for example, intercultural communication. How do you build things up? And I think the issue of creating trust across nations, across like global platforms, marketplaces where you try to attract customers, but where you also try to establish relations, even if they're not economic. You have to take this kind of leap of faith, almost like you make a first attempt to reach out, and maybe a small step, but then it has to be responded by a small step from the other, and gradually, sometimes trust is built up. So that's one way to think about trust. The other is that you have a lot of formal regulations to make sure that people who do things wrong, they are punished, so to speak. But that's the much more costly and rarely efficient way to establish trust. But the combination is usually what you try to aim for. You have some basic formal regulations which you can implement, and you can actually make sure that they will be used if there is a need to. But the most of the interaction should be based on a kind of grown order, that people actually start talking to one another and make trade or build up a relation, which then they may want to see one another in real life, for example, on dating platforms and so on and so forth. So you have it all over. It's not just restricted to economic transaction in organized marketplaces. So I think that's an important element, and so that you don't just use literature, you don't just use thinkings about marketplace per se, but you broaden out and you think, what is the problem here? How do we address it? As I see they have done.
Matias, what's your take on this? So Patrik was mentioning dating platforms, things like that. I remember when Facebook was first debuted in 2006, and it was all a very strange idea that you could yeah, that you would be posting your life pretty much in a place where anybody could get it. You seemed to be giving yourself there to this. You didn't know where that information was going, but it seemed to be very, very valuable to people. And even when Facebook, there was a rumor that Facebook would make people pay in order to be on the platform, and there was a kind of a revolt against that. What's your take?
I think that the case she took, I mean, and the whole group, it's valuable because, I mean, it shows how fine details and small pieces of communications, how they play a role in building trust, and how they play a major role in making these transactions being successful in many cases, and in other cases not so successful. But people in these platforms, especially in these cases where fraud is very pervasive, very much extended, how the people, I mean, learn to deal with these problems, how they learn to overcome certain problems. And I think this is one of the main findings. And the whole group, they did a great job in this research. I remember a table, I mean, in which they the result of several interviews, and they have dissected all the interviews and analyzed how people try to deal with these problems, and identify specific situations in this in the communication of in these marketplaces. So I think it's a good example of how people use informal communications to solve certain problems.
Okay, so we have Alexandra Tessier, who is going to speak with us. Hi, Alexandra.
Hi. Yeah, so I was part of Jenna's and Sasha's group. So yeah, we were interested in studying social interactions, since this is what we base ourselves to establish whether we trust someone or not. And what was interesting is that there was a huge difference between the social, like the real world, and the digital world codes. Like there was a big difference in the codes. And for example, we had like the withdrawal effect, where like online it was way more easy. You could just like ghost someone, whereas in real life you could never just go to the cash register and leave without any explanations. So this was one surprising effect. And yeah, as Sasha mentions, like the interactions are way more straight to the point, which was also kind of surprising, because some of our participants mentioned, because we did some interviews, mentioned that like on messages it was very direct, whereas when they met the person they exchanged with online, it was like they had long interactions, long discussions. So this was also one of our key findings.
Okay, and Alexandra, how do you look at marketplaces today differently than you did before taking this course?
I feel like the trust is really interesting, and the different symbols of trust. I would say this.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's move on to our second roundtable. This is markets versus marketplaces, the historical dimensions of marketplace formations. So Patrik, this has a long tradition. I imagine this is kind of seen as an advanced part of society today, this having a surplus and that you can sell, having divisions of labor so that we don't need to do everything ourselves. I don't need to make shoes and make a Mac computer and then code my own Zoom program in order to talk to you. All those things are already done. So I just pay a few dollars or Swiss francs in order to have that service because someone else is working on that. Is that right? Tell us about the formation of marketplaces.
Yeah, thanks. I think what you just mentioned is something that we can observe in the economy, this kind of specialization, that division of labor, so that we can have, you do one thing, I do another, and then we trade with one another. When it comes to marketplaces as a structure, I think it's almost surprising how strong it has been over thousands of years. We don't really see a huge difference. Of course, there are differences. I mean, online and offline, as we just talked about, there are differences. But if you look at from a certain distance, you see that, well, already in the beginning, marketplaces were highly organized. I think this is the key element, and there still are. All the marketplaces that we use, almost all the platforms too. I mean those which are not trading, not marketplace. There is platforms for observation, posting bills, and so on and so forth. They're highly organized, and typically you have to have some kind of membership. So in a sense, you sign up, typically using your credit card and so on. And if you go back 2,000 years, people were controlled already then when entering the marketplace. It was regulated who could trade, with what, how could it be traded, and there were sanctions for those who misbehaved. I think it's very clear to see that the marketplace was then the only really efficient way to extract taxes. And of course, in those days, it wasn't monetary taxes, but it was in kind, really. You took one goat, or you got some food or potatoes or whatever they had. But the way you did it was to bring everything together in one spot. And then you protected those trading, but also taking some resources from them for these protections. It was like an exchange. And then you also made sure that outside of the city, of the cost, or whatever it was, you were not allowed to trade. So you concentrated and controlled, and in a sense monopolized trade within a certain area. And of course, if you went to the next city, you would find something similar, but the distance between the cities may be too far for each individual to actually move with the goods, with the heavy goods. Because there were no trains, there were no access to these technologies. So in that sense, you had like local monopolies which were organized. And in many cases, this was the way to accumulate capital for sovereigns, for princes. They could actually build an army around it and wage war, because waging war in these times were really costly. So you can build something like an organization around the possibility to extract taxation in a fairly efficient way, instead of having to go around and pick 10 potatoes from each and every one farmer. So they had to come to you to do it. So that's a historical thing. But of course, today we have so many things that we can still sit at home and trade with one another. So in a sense, we have a super efficient system. So you can actually get whatever you want home to you through this suppliers and so on and so on, and the things are not necessarily even physically gathered. It's just the virtual trading which is gathered on a site, on a virtual site. But it's still something brought together, and it's organized by someone. And typically someone is making also potentially a lot of profit by organizing this and making this, your platform, your marketplace, the most efficient one compared to others. Well, there's a lot of things to be said there, but I mean, this is like to make sure that you see the historical connection between today and over thousands of years, actually. But also, of course, one should keep an eye on the difference. It's not to say that it's the same thing.
And Patrik, can you tell us a little bit about this historical example of the Champagne Fair? So I guess this is right after, this is in the middle of the Middle Ages. This is really a pan-European trading organization that's happening. Can you tell us about this and why this is so important?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually, because in those days it was unclear if the market or the organization that were traveling with this fair, because it was like a traveling circus that entered one city after another, but it didn't enter all cities. But when this huge group of people came, all the tradesmen, they basically took over the cities. So this was before we had really permanent trading places. This was a traveling trading place. And the notion of fair is also very important, because it means holiday, and it means that you put a bracket around the everyday complexity, so you have an opportunity to do things very, very differently. It's like a holiday. You do something, you have a feast, you listen to music. So this was the only way people could get impulses from outside, because they couldn't travel on there. They were not allowed, they couldn't, because of they were tied to the farms. But this was an opportunity to see how things were happening in other parts of the country, in other parts of the world, because of course with these people came new traditions, new ones. They showed goods and things that the locals didn't know. So this was very, very important, and they could get in contact with people speaking other language, and so on and so forth. So they were of tremendous importance from a social perspective, and of course from an economic one as well. But gradually these traveling fairs were replaced by permanent places. So in some cases, these traveling tradesmen settled down in certain cities and took over them, and made calls in these cities to make sure that, okay, we settle here, we set up our laws here, and we make sure that people come here, because it's cumbersome to travel around in Europe with all the things and everything that comes with it.
Okay, Matias, what are your thoughts on this? Are these one important aspect to that is the security that allows those merchants to have their stuff not get stolen, and that trust that that Jenna and her group were talking about, so that they know, okay, we can trade and it's working. There's some kind of larger oversight that makes people feel that they can trust, they feel confident in the process. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main findings, and one of the main findings and ideas that we have, I mean, based on extensive literature review that we made here in our research group, is that several aspects around marketplaces that we think today there are something new. For example, standards, or the idea that, for example, the marketplaces, the organizers of marketplaces are not so much not happy if you make transactions outside the marketplaces, and they develop certain mechanisms to avoid this type of behavior. I mean, these are problems that were, I mean, pervasive in the agora, was the marketplace in the ancient Greek. At that time was, I mean, a problem. The Greek people, they developed, for example, standards how to the measure of bricks. You were not allowed to sell, for example, wool or textiles in rainy days, because means that the weight of your textiles will, I mean, be higher. So these rules were already there. Yeah, and also the one interesting aspect of marketplaces is that you see them in very different situations. In war situations, marketplaces were used by the Romans to conquer the Northern Africa, for example, to foster commerce in certain areas, to avoid competition by setting up different marketplaces in different moments of the week. So this is the idea of temporal marketplaces, that you have different marketplaces devoted to a certain product. So people, I mean, sellers are not competing with each other. I mean, they are just, you are on Monday selling your fruits, and then your competition is in another city is selling on Friday. Yeah. So these are different aspects of marketplaces. And this is also interesting to see how certain infrastructures and communications developed, and in some cases the place became or lost meaning and lost weight, because of the infrastructures and communications allowed people not to go to a specific place, but to trade without any reference to a place.
So I'd like to bring in Laura Ascu, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your last name, and her group is Kenza, Sasha, and Artur. Laura, tell us a little bit about your project. Matias, he was just mentioning the marketplace of the Agora, an actual physical structure where you know when you're inside, I guess similar to the Facebook platform that Jenna and her group were talking about. You know when you're inside, you know when you're logged on, you're logged off, you're in a marketplace, you're outside of a marketplace. Tell us a little bit about your study.
Hello. So my group focused on Globus, which is a department store in Switzerland, and we wanted to see if Globus was a marketplace or not. So to analyze this, we first went to the Zurich store and we but instead of looking at Globus as a whole, we decided to look at it by departments. So we interviewed the food department, then the clothing department, and then lastly, we interviewed the luxury department. We found out that the marketplace characteristics changed according to the department. So for instance, the food department was not a market since it was fully organized by Globus itself. And then on the other hand, we saw that the cosmetics department was a marketplace. Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And we went to the Globus store since it's the biggest one, if I'm not mistaken, and it's also close to St. Gallen, but it's also the only one that has the luxury department in it.
Okay. And was that surprising to you? Did what surprised you? What was interesting?
Like for the food department, I think it was kind of obvious, even without the interviews, that it was not going to be a marketplace. But I did expect personally for other departments that maybe we could have found like a more consistent result. Whereas, for instance, for the clothing and luxury, we saw that it really changed according to each brand. So I would say that was a surprising factor.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. And can we hear from Kenza? Kenza, how was what was your takeaway here? Why did you decide to do Globus? Or maybe Artur, or Sasha? Sasha?
I can talk. So hi, I'm Sasha. I think the most interesting part of our project was analyzing the luxury department, which is on the ground floor, because there you could have many stands of, for instance, all the luxury brands, so Balenciaga, Louis Vuitton, and it was interesting to see how, a store like Globus invited some other luxury brands to actually sell their products. And to see if, for instance, the salespersons of Balenciaga followed the rules of Balenciaga or Globus. And yeah, we discovered that all the salespersons mainly follow the rules that their own brands dictates, but they just follow the general rules of the stores dictated by Globus. So, for instance, the opening hours and other more general rules. So that was interesting.
Wow, fantastic. And when you think about sociology, what do you think about now? What's your definition?
Well, thanks to this course, I will say that when I think about maybe a marketplace, I don't. Before taking this course, I consider a marketplace as just maybe a place where sellers and buyers met and sellers could sell all of their products, while now I see that there is more a logic behind it and all those dimensions like membership, hierarchy, rules. So it's more organized than it seems.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sasha. And Kenza, can we try that again? Can you say hi? No, I guess we can't hear you. We can't hear you very well, Kenza. I'm sorry. Let's go on. How about Artur? Is Artur there? Okay, we'll continue on then. Okay, thank you so much to your group. That is to Laura, Sasha, Kenza and Artur, thank you so much. So our next roundtable is the consequences of marketplaces. So what does that mean exactly, Patrik, when you talk about the consequences of marketplaces? So that means that some people, as they're talking about at Globus, they it works well for luxury goods. It's not in play for sports articles, I guess.
I want to take up what it said, and I think this notion of organization is really key, because this means that as soon as someone has the power to organize things, it means that one can make decisions for others, and this, in a sense, steer others, their behavior, and they can control them, but they can also, by means of positive and negative sanctions, that is, you can give them rewards for doing certain things. So there are some marketplaces where it's actually you get some kind of local credit, like money, for helping others out. For example, if you're good at taking pictures, you help others out, taking pictures on and help them. Or if you go good at programming, or you go at writing, you can do things for others, and that for that kind of service or the work that you get some credit, or your own site can be lifted up so that it's published sooner. I mean, that's one of the top sites. Imagine it's a marketplace where you have 10,000 sellers. Of course, then it really matters if you're seen in the first row or in the last one. It really, so this work is positive. You get positive sanction and you get rewards from it. But of course, you have also these negative sanctions where you say, okay, this is something that are not allowed here on the platform, and eventually you're expelled if you misbehave, because that's of course a very important thing for the others to know, that there is actually, if someone really does do things in the wrong way, try to cheat or whatever it might be, you can actually call someone and say, this is a wrong, this person did, or this company does something which is not allowed, and there might be like it's like a local police force in a sense. And because this goes back to this organizing, that these organized also have a lot of power, and it can be used for good purpose, but it can also be used for bad purposes, to force people, to put them under so much pressure that they can hardly do much but move small things. So that's an important element, and that's why the consequence of marketplaces, first of all, for those involved working, either selling or buying. And in some cases, we have situation marketplace where you switch. You operate sometimes as buyers, as sellers, like eBay. You may sell your old things, but then you buy from someone else. In other marketplaces, typically like labor marketplaces, you don't really buy from others, although you can imagine you sell your services as a computer programmer, and then you buy the service of someone who help you to clean or cook or whatever. But it's strictly speaking, in one domain you operate typically as a seller. And of course, here you open up the entire global scene, so you can have people compete from Switzerland, which is a very like high seller, or the US, which is also a high seller, to countries which can have Eastern Europe, which are in between, to countries like India and Bangladesh, where you have people who are whose the wage cost is much lower. So you have this huge kind of competition. It's like a marketplace where people are actually operating under different legal conditions, at the same time competing financially, which means that, I mean, it's not, in some countries you have a minimum wage, so you are not allowed to go under this, for example, when you sign a contract. So there are a lot of these legal dimensions that are in place, and which structures the marketplace, but then the marketplace themselves have the right and power to structure within their own parameters. And then at the same time, you have this kind of logic where people are situated around the world, operating with different conditions. Some would be super happy to get for a piece of work $2. Another person will not even consider doing it. So you have this market that actually allocate resources and enables people to do things which otherwise couldn't have been done. So for some, this is really a huge advantage. For others who used to work for a higher wage but are then forced to compete with others with lower wages, it might be a disadvantage. So it depends on where you are, how you see it. and of course it's still somewhat unregulated because of this global. There's no global board of regulators as you would have within a nation, and of course this has been played out by many marketplace organizers over the last years, so that they open up a shop in one country or move from one country to another because the regulation is more beneficial to them, and so on and so forth. This we of course see in all parts of the industry, but it may be even more salient here because the competition is still between people who are physically located somewhere, but they have to compete with one another without really knowing with whom they compete. Which can, as I said, it's not saying that it's only bad or only good, but one has to look into the cases more specifically to find things out. And of course, there are a lot of illegal things, but that's not marketplaces per se that are illegal. It's just something they offer as any kind of legal structure. It also offers an incentive to do illegal things.
Okay.
So there are a lot of things to talk about the consequences, but I think it's if one constrains oneself to discussing the labor situation, then it's a big enough topic to talk about, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay. And Matias, do you want to add to that? So we began the conversation talking about Globus and this luxury market that's happening inside. What does that mean when one Louis Vuitton, they make a wrong, they don't abide by the rules and they get kicked out of Globus? What does that mean to that company? What does that mean to Louis Vuitton to not be present at the Globus marketplace?
I mean, the Louis Vuitton, as other companies, they might be not present, but they can be also present in just in one moment, and this is one of the cases this project addresses, the Globus project. When they, for example, find out that in Globus there are pop-up stores in some moments of the week or the month, the company set up a store, and this works like a small marketplace where the property rights belong to Louis Vuitton, for example, or the luxury brand, and they are hosted by Globus. And I think this case it's highly interesting because it shows the new configurations, and I think it's one of the goals of our course, to see not just only, I mean, analyze what we have in our minds about marketplaces and repeat a definition and the dimensions, but to see what we see, I mean, what we can observe in the reality and analyze cases. And this Globus case show us that there is a combination of, this is a department store, sometimes it becomes a marketplace. In other moments, it depends on the sector, in the luxury sector, the food sector. This is it's very dynamic, and I think it shows also the resilience of this organization aspect of marketplaces.
Okay, fantastic. So I would like to call on maybe Teano Iasus, or Lasus, excuse me if I pronounce your name wrong. Are you there? Can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Hi, we can hear you just great. Hi.
Amazing. Hi. So with my group, we've digged into the Swiss agricultural markets. More particularly, we wanted to understand this shift back of a marketplace where so we came from an observation, actually, from a participant of the group who actually saw that the agricultural Swiss market was shifting back to a more classical model where the exchange would happen more at Marktplatz, for example, rather than having the exchange at the farm, where the farmer would sell its products to a third party, and the third party would sell it again to the big industries, right? And so yes, it was very interesting in the sense that we got to understand more how, and more particularly the reasons of a shift in the marketplace, and that it's not always driven, for example, for bigger profits. There is also a lot of social interactions that are behind, and it's human driven, I would say.
Fantastic. So, Teano, staying with you, I wanted to ask, why don't we move on to our next roundtable, which is, do marketplaces control our daily lives? So we started when Patrik and I were talking about doing this show, we were mentioning how, you know, during this global pandemic, a lot of people still believe that people from Davos, the World Economic Forum, that they are trying to give people these fake vaccines in order to control them, that people really don't control their own lives. It's really this rich oligopoly who control the world. So what has this course taught you about that? And what would you say about that?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think I would say it depends a lot on the marketplace. If, for example, I take the example of the Swiss market.
I'm sorry, Teano, I think we lost you at the moment. Maybe can we hear from Alexandra again? Alexandra, are you there? Or we can go right to Matias. Matias, what are your thoughts?
There, I think he's back. I mean, this case, I think it is an interesting one, because it shows the tendency of producers to come closer to the buyers. And I think one of the findings of this small research is to show how the different producers in Switzerland are coming to the marketplaces to have contact with, to profit from the contact with customers, and this contact produces a change in the way they produce. So it shows somehow the relation between the marketplace and the supply chain, and how the marketplace affects. And we were talking about the consequences of marketplaces. I mean, the marketplace, and especially the contact between consumers and suppliers or producers have an impact on the production. They, for example, start to consider consumers' demands. I mean, what they want, how they expect about the product. So, and they try to bring to the marketplace this type of new products. So I think it is also a good example of the consequences of the marketplace that we were talking previously.
Okay, and I'd like to bring in, again, this is Kenza Meinen. Thank you so much for writing this, Kenza, because we had problems with your microphone. Kenza writes, I just wanted to say that it was really surprising, but also interesting at the same time to see how unique was the structure of Globus. As the others said, we could conclude in our report that the marketplace characteristic of Globus changes throughout the departments. This, therefore, presents a new configuration for a shopping center, and going directly on the field made our work much more captivating. Again, thank you so much, Kenza. So to round up our conversation, I'm wondering, can Artur Iskander, are you there, Artur? Can you say something? Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on all this?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Oh, hello. Yes, I also think it was very interesting to see that marketplaces are much more than just a physical place where you can exchange goods. And yeah, also I was in the Globus team, and I also really enjoyed conducting this experience. Yeah.
Okay, great. And maybe Kayan Müller. Kayan, are you there?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Hi, can hear you just great. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was in the HSG Talents group, and we looked at the talents fair at the HSG. In the end, I think our project was not as interesting as the other ones because there was a lot of trouble in actually reaching the people and talking to them. So we couldn't really do any field research, and we had to do everything through interviews with the companies. But I would say the experience was interesting to see the perspectives of the actors on the fair.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Kayan. And Tomas Kolorov, are you there, Tomas? We haven't heard from you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a bit busy. I was cooking.
No problem. Tell us, and
I didn't
what are
hear
your
you
thoughts
calling
on
me
all
out.
this after taking this course?
I just came back. I'm really sorry I didn't listen. I heard that Kayan was called up, but I just left at that moment.
Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you very much. So, and last, Teano, are you there? You were cut off when you were last speaking.
I think it's working again.
Hi.
Is it? Hi.
Briefly, your last thoughts?
About in general about the whole class, I think it was a very useful and interesting. It was a great insight into the marketplaces and also sociology, which I think it's a, I mean, obviously a great combination. I don't know if you can hear me, but as a last thought, I would say that it would be interesting to get more insight about more shifts in marketplaces like we've done for the agricultural place, because I think this is something that we will see more in more industries.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I hope everyone has had a chance to speak. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to get to know all of you at the Institute of Sociology, St. Gallen. So I'd want to close our program with thoughts by Professor Patrik Aspers. Patrik?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great pleasure being with you, Simeon. And I think one of the issues that we see when we look historically, but also when we look at these contemporary studies that has been done in the various groups, is that we see everything is not going in one direction. It's very historically, this has also never been the case that we only have one type of economic exchange, one type of trade. Parallel to one another, there are the fairs. We still have fairs. I mean, you show this picture, which is about a fair which is almost 1,000 years old, but still we have fairs. They look a bit different, but they are still people coming together. And it's typically at the fair, it's not just about business, it's about social gathering. A lot of people come there because they know in the evening they can go out, maybe they can meet people, have a drink, they can see the museum in the city, and so on and so forth. All that is part of social life. And if one doesn't understand this, I think one misses out a lot if one just thinks that everything is somehow about market and efficiency. Well, certainly that's a driving force, but it's so much around it. And in order to have this efficient market, you need a lot of the other things too. So I think that's a general insight, and we have tried to give a bit focus on marketplace, but also really to show how the historicity of the marketplace. It's not something that has only existed in the past, but it still exists, and it's actually something that's being developed. I mean, this farmers market is one example that you tend to see them. Of course, they're typically very expensive, but you get really good things. You can actually talk to the people, you can establish a trust relation, and maybe to some extent sidestep the main production chain where you import things and so on and so forth, because people have different preferences. And this opportunity structure of different forms of trading, I think, is a value in itself. And I think we haven't talked so much about it during the course, but I think that's a nice way of trying to round it off, to see that marketplaces sits within a larger set of ways of trading or exchanging.
Fantastic. And Patrik, can you tell us, coming up next, what would you like? What do you wish these wonderful students? What do you want them to take another course, a follow-up course, or what are your thoughts?
Well, we have a very liberal system. It's the Humboldt system here, effectively, in our part of the university. That is, we offer courses, and the students are free to choose among the courses. And I think that's the way the Humboldt foresaw it, how he would like to see it. And we try to pursue it by making, in this case, a research course, which means that this course will be given next year. Of course, then other students will come, but it will develop, because we develop and the course develops with the students. So the students are very important also in giving us input. And I think this is the way it should be, that it's a meeting point. And I think you offer us yet another meeting point in the public to talk about these things. And I think that's exactly what the university is about. Free choice among alternatives, and that you have a right to form yourself to become a citizen, so to speak.
How inspiring. Fantastic. Let's see.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course. Dr. Davis, hi.
Yeah, sure. Quick question to you people from Switzerland. Has anyone been to the marketplace in Lausanne? I guess not. I used to go there all the time. Près de Marché.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did not really, sorry, to interrupt. In our work, we kind of handled some farmers that were located in Vaud and that were going to marketplaces in Lausanne, but we did not really go in depth about the Lausanne market, but we talked about it kind of.
Okay.
Marketplaces are great. They're really great. You can talk to people, you can bargain with people, and there's no scamming going on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you,
Thanks.
Dr. Davis. Thank you, Thomas. So let's see how we can.
Simi, I wonder if I could ask a question.
Of course, Fred. Hi.
I wonder if you might comment on the role of currency, to the extent it has no intrinsic value, and by extension of that, the need for trust.
Matias, do you want to go? Do you want to answer that?
I mean, the currencies do play a major role. I mean, also, of course, in marketplaces. From in our course, I mean, from the what we have seen in the examples taken by the cases analyzed by the students, we haven't focused much on currencies. What we have seen is that, for example, in the case of Facebook Marketplace, is that it's not the problem of currencies as such, but this is the problem of trust and how people try to induce other people to give money. I mean, basically they are, trying to fraud other marketplace participants, induce them to give money in advance, for example. There are certain rules in these cases, but we haven't focused much on currency and the build of trust.
Patrik, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think trust and money, of course, are intimately tied. And if you look at historically, you would see that you had, of course, a lot of different currencies. And of course, they centered around trade and interaction, and that people knew them. And gradually today, we have currencies that spans across the world. And of course, then it means that there are so many people. So if one or two people do not trust one, it really doesn't matter. It has to be very, very many who stop trusting a certain currency, stop trusting a government. So it's much more dependent on on the variety, the multitude of people involved means that there are, by that also in a sense, more stable over time, because there are more people having stake in the currency itself.
Okay, Matias, you have another comment?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to mention, it came to my mind this idea of Facebook to develop their own currency. I mean, they wanted, Mark Zuckerberg wanted to have their own his own currencies, and it is interesting because it shows how these big platforms and big marketplaces are becoming, I mean, prevalent in our lives, and how much power they have in our. I mean, we were talking about if the marketplaces are taking, I mean, how the influence they have in our lives, and I think it is a good example of marketplaces or platforms assuming roles that were usually associated with states. I mean, the state is the entity producing money. I mean, and now we have platforms trying to do the same.
Fantastic. So let's see how we can stay in touch with the Institute of Sociology at the University of St. Gallen. Here is the website available for people in English or in German. So it is fss.unisg, which is University St. Gallen. So there it is. And people can reach out to you, Patrik and Matias, is that right?
Definitely they can. We're more than welcome to do so.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, yes? Okay, great. So reach out to Patrik Aspers, Matias Dewey with your questions there on the website. I'll put it here in the chat room so everybody can reach out to them. There it is again. So thank you so very much to Professor Patrik Aspers and to Dr. Matias Dewey and their fabulous students.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Simon.
Let's take a look at what's coming up next week. Here we have it. It is Rosita Jakova-Gotza, Violin Versatility. Playing first violin is one of the most challenging professional positions out there. The spotlight is always on, and every move the first violinist makes is instantly amplified and judged by everyone around. So, to play that position well takes a lot of trained nerves, mastery of the violin itself, and of that role's place in the musical repertoires, as well as leadership abilities. Rarely does any violinist master even just one of its three professional domains, performing as concertmaster of the orchestra, first violinist in the string quartet, or teacher of a violin class. Dr. Rosita Jakova-Gotza is credited with mastering all three. Her colleagues consider her at the top of her game, be she in the role of concertmaster of the Tulsa Symphony Orchestra, as first violinist of the Harrington String Quartet, or as lecturer in violin at the West Texas A&M University. Come welcome Rosita to our show for a look at what violin versatility is all about, and let's ask her how we can learn from her example to become better professionals, no matter what field we work in. Again, that's next Wednesday, Rosita Jakova-Gotza, Violin Versatility. I'd also like to point out that a new documentary, Vienna Live, has just been published and is available to buy. It's in French and Spanish. Marie-Louise Cantos, 40 ans diffusant la musique espagnole en Suisse, and it is available at simeonmoro.com. Once again, thank you so very much to Patrik Aspers, to Matias Dewey, and to the students at the Institute of Sociology at the University of St. Gallen. Thanks very much to Agnieszka and Benoit Rivolet for their support of this show. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants who make it all worthwhile. From St. Gallen, Switzerland, and New London, New Hampshire, goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.